Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's XO Metaverse Hangout members only. We have a really special guest tonight. And I just want to have a few announcements before we kick it off, which is that ET Let's Talk is doing their monthly CE5 this Saturday. So it's the Saturday closest to the new moon every month. I just shared the links into the chat and I'll do it again. So it's much easier to see UFO actually when you're with other people that are like-minded. So we encourage you to put your name on this map, and then you can also search on the map to find out if anybody in your neighborhood is doing it, and you can go to their house and do it together. So I also wanted to remind you that this week on Sunday, we're doing our spoon bending, and the word is getting out. We're becoming quite famous about the levels that we're reaching with the spoon bending. And Uri Geller, who is the king of spoon bending, now knows about us and is totally impressed. He's like, wow, that's a lot of spoons they're bending. So we look forward to bringing him in. It's 4 a.m. in Israel where he is, and he's decorated an entire car with the number of spoons that he's bent over the years and have been sent to him by famous people all over the world. But anyway, it's wonderful that he's taking notice of our work with Mind Over Matter. So with that, I hand it over to my co-founder, Daniel. Welcome.
Great, thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. Today we're talking with Candace Craw-Goldman. This is actually a recorded interview from last week, but what will happen is I'm going to present the results of the collective intelligence survey. Then I'll play about half of the interview. About halfway through, we will break into breakout groups. And then we'll resume just like it's a normal XO hangout. You can continue being in the main room watching the rest of the interview or go into breakout rooms. Then when we come back together, we'll have probably about 15 minutes to answer any questions. I am trained in the methodology that Candace brought forward from the work of Dolores Cannon. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have around that. So right now I'm going to share my screen to share some of the results, right? So we asked you, have you ever experienced different types of phenomenon? Like hypnosis is number one. Everyone who responded had experienced hypnosis. Then there's energy healing, higher self communication, spirit communication, paranormal events, precognition, telepathy, channeling, and parallel realities. 4 of you responded. So the stories are powerful. So you have experienced expansion of worldview after hearing a story, and that's 83% of you. Likewise, inspired to take action, emotional and spiritual healing, contact with spirit world. 4 of you experienced parallel reality shifts after hearing a story, and 3 of you with the UFO UAP sighting. So that's amazing, actually. So sharing the stories, and 2 of you experienced ET and non-human intelligence contact. So that's just amazing. Let's keep sharing our stories because this shows that it's really effective. We do talk about the quantum effects of like quantum healing and having different sets of objective facts. So 8 of you have responded that you've experienced highly strange events, 6 parallel realities, 4 mandala effects, and 4 as timeline confluences, and 3 of you by location. I want to hear those stories. And then 3 of you had contact with different versions of yourself. And we have some descriptions here that I'm really looking forward to going through. But right now I want to call out, this is the Quantum Healers Forum that Candace references there. You can learn about Beyond Quantum Healing and participate by going there. It's at quantumhealers.com, and I'll copy those into the chat once the video starts playing. Then her website here, and you can have a session with her or learn about BQH at CandaceCraw-Goldman.com. I am going now to shift over to playing that video, and just give me a second as I ensure everything is set up. And so now we are about to begin the interview. Wonderful. So thank you for being here. Candace. So you are the third person we are interviewing in our Exo Metaverse Extraordinary Stories mini-series. We started it off with Preston Dennett, who is a UFO researcher, author of 28 books and more than 100 articles about UFO and ET contact, and that we're thinking about his interview talking about stories that inspire. The next interview we did was with Ray Hernandez, who is the director of Consciousness and Contact Research Institute. He put out the Foundation of Research for Extraordinary and Extraterrestrial Experiences, which was the first and largest statistical study scientifically based about non-human intelligence and ET contact related to UFO and UAP. He found that things were basically based on the experiencer testimony that the encounters with these beings are extraordinarily positive, and that it reveals this world to be something like consciousness, based in consciousness. So he's, and we saw his work as sort of stories that become knowledge. And so today we're talking with Candace Craw-Goldman, who's the founder of the Beyond Quantum Healing methodology that comes up and out of the work of Dolores Cannon with her quantum healing hypnosis technique. But we are thinking about this as stories that heal. So the goal of this mini series is to educate viewers on respectful and open ways of sharing stories, to explore how personal stories can become collective knowledge, and how can we use these stories to raise consciousness and make contact, especially with ourselves or higher selves. So the inquiry questions that I'm putting forward and onto the table, and we don't have to follow them, we can just go with the flow, but how best can we relate to someone else's extraordinary stories, especially when it's hard to believe? How can we respect or understand each other's stories, especially when they contradict our worldview or historical set of fact? And I'm thinking, Candace, of our example in the John Dee study group that you reported on, where there were 3 different sets of historical facts all converging in your kitchen. Then how can personal stories like ET contact, abduction tales become collective knowledge? And especially I'm thinking about how can our tales about dreams and hypnosis really serve as testimony for collective knowledge? And then how can our stories serve as portals or vehicles to a strange new world, a greater reality, or to our higher self? So thank you for being here. And I'd love to just start with your story. I know you worked with Dolores Cannon, and that's where a lot of the quantum healing comes out of, but she even had this experience of growing with her stories, and then reaching a limit and then growing more. And I even see that in the case of your work. So it's like you worked with QHHT, and then you grew and grew and grew, and then reached the limit, and then brought out Beyond Quantum Healing. So I'd love if you could just share the story about how you got here and doing the work of Beyond Quantum Healing.
Oh my gosh. Well, I could take a whole hour just with that one, but yeah, so I had an extraordinary experience, just a personal experience in the year of 2008, where I was just dealing with my own health. And I was a wife and a mom and a photographer, and we had horses, and I was doing a lot of rodeo photography, but mostly I was a mom to teenagers. But I'd been dealing with a pain condition, and I've always had a sensitive body. I'm 60 this year, and I'm still learning how and why that is the case. Even to, I know this is going to be a tangent within a tangent, but I'm now actually exploring this huge event that happened to me when I was less than 2 years old is suddenly coming into my focus about why my body is as extraordinarily sensitive as it is, and that actually has to do with do you know what a Portuguese man o' war looks like? Those jellyfish,
like big and long, right?
They're purple, they're big and long, and their tentacles have a vicious, poisonous coating on them that the tiniest little amount on your skin is horrifically painful. And one of those washed up on a beach and covered most of my body when I was less than 2 years old, and it went from my left shoulder down across my heart, all the way to my hip. And what I'm realizing now through dreams, through my channeled or imagined conversations with Dolores, that was one of the things that like propelled me into kind of the life I'm living right now, which is well, on the edge of sensitivity. I actually have a high tolerance for pain, but I actually feel a lot of things that I've actually had doctors say, you can't feel that. Anyway, I'm like, yes, I can. Anyway, back to the 2008 thing, I was just dealing with this chronic pain, and I'd been doing everything that I knew how to do conventionally, didn't help. Around 2000, I discovered Reiki, and that soothed me, but it didn't solve my problem at all. And things were coming to a head in 2008. And then I had this extraordinary supernormal experience where I left my body and I found myself standing before a collection of light beings that I now know to be my light council. At the time, I had no idea what to make of it all. And I thought of them as angelic beings. And they gave me a message. And the message was, it was very specific. I actually had been, I think I used this phrase, I prayed myself into a stupor because of the pain that I was experiencing and some details around it. And I found myself leaving my body and standing there. And one of the beings, the one in the center, handed me a piece of paper. And that piece of paper told me to do 3 things. And that was extraordinary because my prayer basically was, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? My prayers up until then were a little different. They were help me based, right? And something about the prayers that day were focused, intense, and produced a different result. And that result, I followed the most incredible rabbit hole that very next day with the list of 3 things that culminated with me opening up a book that coincidentally, a book that was sent to me in the mail that I received the very next day of Dolores Cannon with a friend saying, you know, I think she teaches classes. And then, you know, that turned into me driving up to Arkansas, and the whole way up to Arkansas, as I'm allowing my imagination to imagine what this is all going to be about, my imagination was telling me I was going to be the person Dolores Cannon was going to choose to be the demonstration subject. And I was going to have my past life regression, which was number 3 on the list of things to do to address my life and my pain condition. And I had an argument internally in my head the whole way, like, where's this coming from? Why do you think it's going to be you? You know, just this whole back and forth thing. And then when I got through the class and I understood how she was going to decide how this worked, she said, she had a notebook on her desk. She said, just put your name right here, or I'll put your name on this notebook if you want to be considered to be chosen. And I didn't put my name on there. Of the people in the class, I think there was maybe 25 people there. I think I noticed about 3 of us did not put our names on that list. And I was following a really strange internal, that I didn't share with anybody, believe me, thought process, which was, I'm not going to put my name on the list and she's still going to choose me. And if that's the case, I'm going to believe this thing that keeps happening to me with all these not really voices in my head, but these downloads, the intuitions, the experiences I've had that, you know, led me to contemplate different kinds of messages. And I'm like, I'm going to fully believe all of that, not being fanciful and frivolous things that don't mean anything, but I'm going to follow that completely if she actually does pick me. Yeah. And she actually did. She actually did. She stood up at the time when it was time to choose somebody. And she said, well, this is highly unusual, she said, but she would call the SC, or she called it subconscious or the superconscious, told me to not pick anyone on this list. And then she got up out of her chair and she walked across the room and stood in front of me and asked if I would be her demonstration subject. And at that point, my entire life changed. This was even before the regression. It was just before it. It was like, oh, wow. Yeah. I kind of get it now. And so we had the regression. We got along famously. That regression continues to inform me to today on different levels. And we began working with each other very, very quickly as I supported those who went through her program. And I assisted her in live classes and in programs behind the scenes from 2008 until her death in 2014. And then after that, very much expanded. The world has certainly changed. Yeah. It certainly needs expansion. She actually, the spirit of Dolores Cannon worked without limits, truly, but she was a woman in her mid 80s, and there were some technological limitations that were part of her existence, and a little bit more too. And as an example, one of the things that we were pushing as practitioners to expand what she was doing even was in one of our conferences, in one of our reunions, we decided to take 3 people at one time and do a quantum healing session with 3 people in trance at a time. And we were actually telling Dolores we're going to do this as an experiment. And I'll never forget it. She was like, well, what do you want to do that for? She, it didn't occur to her. She wasn't all that interested in it, but she heard about it later. And we did the same thing again the next year. She showed up the next year and she sat in the audience and she participated as a viewer, and there was a lot of head nodding, and she, so Dolores Cannon was careful and she was measured, and she did a lot of thinking and gathering of her information before she would make changes. But some of the people that she taught herself up underneath her kind of took that, bone and ran with it a little faster. And she was a little slower to adopt some of those things. And then of course she passed on, and some of us have expanded even more since her passing. And experimented in some different ways, but always with the client's best interest at heart, and with permissions and all that kind of stuff. So, not crossing any sort of ethical boundaries in my viewpoints and estimations. So I don't know, did I answer your question?
Oh, yeah, you did. Yeah. There's a few things I want to just dive into based on what you said. First thing I do want to call out is the sense of your story about going to a council of beings. This is very much consistent with Ray Hernandez's findings. Actually, it's like more than 40 or 50% of people who have seen UFOs and had ET contact actually go into a realm something like that. So it's really interesting to connect the dots between the interviews. But then you mentioned something around imagination, like the role of imagination. And I'm even thinking about like the promptings that you've had, or sort of like stories that your imagination is telling you, like Dolores is talking to you after her death, right? Through the spirit communications, or your imagination approaching that regression. So how do you understand the role of imagination in this sort of process of unfolding or things like that? Yeah.
That's probably the best question you could answer, or ask me. I have a lot of thoughts on that. One of the things that I say in the BQH course to my own students, and that I talk about a lot, even of course to clients as well, is I make the claim that the imagination is the language of the higher self. Yeah. And you could poke holes in that in a lot of different ways, but the definition helps in exploration of consciousness in a lot of ways. And it also explains this. And I think in some ways, this is even more important to understanding where we are as a culture. And that's to look at how, especially here in the Western world, mostly our imagination is looked down upon, and it is captured in a box. And I mean, just think about it. From the time you were a kid, you've been told to get your head out of the clouds, to stop making that up, stop pretending. You've been told to sit in your little chair, which is, I think, just, training to be in a cubicle. And no offense to people who work in cubicles. I understand about, I've worked in my own cubicle, making a living, but it was in training to be the kind of cog in society that some sort of force is wanting from us, and think about it. What did we as kids want? We mostly wanted to play, and we wanted to run in recess. We wanted maybe a whole lot more art and music, and we got those for 15 minutes on, every other Thursday. They would throw us little crumbs, right? But most of the time it's like, you stay in line, you stay in this box and don't ask questions. And the teacher would interact with us, but only to see how well we were following the program. And when we were asked questions, we were supposed to provide the correct answer, right? We were not supposed to use our imagination and make up an answer or create an answer. We're supposed to provide it. So we've been in training from the time we've been very small, even to some very basic things. What's your name? Well, you go to your thing up here where it collects all the information and you provide the correct answer of that name. And once you sort of realize this huge thing that's going on in society that tries to keep you from really jumping into your imagination, and some they let people in society do this a little bit, actors, artists, singers, a little bit, right? And some of those who cannot be reined in, well, you might as well let them go in there and then they can entertain and everything. But the masses, no. Let's keep the masses over here because it keeps the machine going. So the imagination is huge. I think it's just absolutely huge. And so when we do this kind of work, we ask the client, and that's just one kind of work. Quantum healing is just one kind of work, but we ask them to believe their imagination. It's not easy. It's one of the reasons the trance state is utilized here, because it kind of takes that part of your mind that analyzes things and it kind of soothes it. In some cases, puts it to sleep. That's called somnambulism.
Yep.
But the idea is to take that sort of analyzing portion of our mind and not let it stop the flow of the imagination. But once you kind of have a handle on that, this can move into so many different areas of your life. And, even when you had the little slide, stories that heal, as I'm doing my chores upstairs and making sure I, have everything prepared for our interview today, a story kept coming to mind. And I was thinking, well, I don't know why that story is coming to mind. And then I thought to remember it. And I'm like, well, maybe that has something to do with this interview. And if it's okay, I'd like to
yes, please.
tell that story. So because this story, and one of the reasons I think it's important to tell this story is because while I do, run the community of quantum healers and teach BQH, et cetera, and do sessions in that way, this doesn't have anything to do with any of that, but
Right.
It's a story that heals. And it also fits some of your other questions, I think, in a really extraordinary way. It was another incredible experience in my own life. And here's how it happened. And it fits some of your other questions, your brilliant questions, Daniel. My gosh, I love your questions.
Thank you.
I read a story. It was probably just it might've been a blog article or something like that. So, but it wasn't a novel. It wasn't anything like that, but it was a story about someone who went to sleep. And when they woke up, they found themselves in what they perceived to be another world, in another version of the body that they had. It wasn't like a completely different body, but there were a few things that were off, and they participated for a time in this life. They went back to sleep. They woke up the next day. And I mean, the whole thing was a really big deal in that particular story. And I read this story as I was going to sleep one night when we were living in Texas. And I was going to sleep in a room separate from my husband that night. Why? I was so ill with reacting to cedar pollen. Actually, it's called mountain juniper. That I had to sit asleep, almost sitting up. I couldn't be in public almost anywhere. Water was coming out of, my nose and my eyes, and It was awful. I tried wearing masks. I tried filtering my house. I tried doing all of that. I even remember that. We're trying to wear masks outside, which was even back then ridiculous. And I couldn't do it even to try to help my health. I couldn't get enough oxygen, so I wouldn't do it. But, you know, the kind of yellow pollen that was everywhere. And it was getting to be where, I mean, I don't know about anaphylaxis with that kind of stuff, but it was serious. It affected everything about everything. I couldn't even think because I had such a hard time simply breathing. I was very ill and nothing was working. No antihistamines, no anything. I was, once again, I'm like trying to figure out, why am I so sensitive? Why am I having this problem? You know, my whole life I've had these issues. And I happened to read that story before going to bed. And I remember before sort of turning out the light and trying to sleep sitting up and just being so sick. I remember thinking, well, I wonder, that might give me some interesting dreams tonight. Boom, it absolutely did. I read that story and then this happened. I woke up in a different room, in a different world. I woke up in a bed that was round. It was very strange. It was round. And I was in a house that was laid out unlike any house I've ever seen. You know, the bed was sort of elevated. There weren't any right angles to walls. It was a very strange thing. And I'm just kind of waking up and I'm looking at it, and the comforters were like clown colors, which is not me at all. In my sleeping environment, I'm very subdued in colors and settings. And I'm looking around and I'm starting to panic because I'm waking up in a place that I don't know where I am. And I'm doing the thing, you know, I'm pinching myself and I'm feeling myself. And I'm like, okay, this is me. That's my body. Here I am. I'm awake. Where the hell am I? And I'm starting to panic. And right as I'm starting to really absolutely have a meltdown, into the room run these two children. And guess what? These children were my children. They were my daughter, Lauren, my son, Dylan. Now, when I was having this entire experience, my children were teenagers, but the children that ran into the room were my children when they were much, much younger, but they were my children. And this is just so fascinating because so the mother in me kicked in and I kept myself from melting down, because as a parent, you don't melt down when your children are there. So the presence of my children, even though they were like a decade younger than they were supposed to be last time I saw them, kept my cool enough that I stepped into mother role where hold your feelings, hold your emotions. And they were just playing. And I remember asking them at one point, you know, I looked over at Lauren and I'm like, Lauren, how old are you? It was the only thing I could say. She turned around, oh, mama, I'm 4 years old. Dylan went, I'm 2, like, you know, this. And I hear their voices. They sound like themselves. My daughter had a bobbed haircut. She never had a bobbed haircut in her life. I am still freaking out, but quietly. And then I really start freaking out. What if my husband walks in? What do I tell him? I am so upset. I don't know what's going on. Reality has completely shifted here. What is going on? And then suddenly I realized this. I didn't have any of these on and I could see perfectly. I could see perfectly. And you know what? Then I realized I was breathing perfectly. I had no problems breathing. And then my next thought was I felt my hair and it felt sort of the same. And then I was thinking, I need to go look at a mirror. How old am I? What else is different on me? You know? And then the whole thing. And then I thought, do I tell my husband? What if he walks in the room? And then, so I immediately thought, no, don't say anything yet, because you could get thrown into an insane asylum, right? So be quiet, go look for a mirror. And then the whole thing, and I just went like this. I went, and I kind of leaned back and I took a couple deep breaths. All of a sudden I was asleep again. And I was in a dream. And I'm remembering in my dream that I was a person in Texas with allergies and teenagers. I'm remembering that I wake up in a room that's a crazy room with younger children, no glasses and no allergies. And I'm in this room and I'm in a party. It's a party. It's a party. And there's a lot of people and they're all talking and some people are saying hi. And I'm like, and they're like, come on, join the party. I'm like, I don't want to join the party. I want to wake up. I want to know what's going on. And then I start thinking, am I going to wake up in this world? Or am I going to wake up in this world? And I wanted to wake up in this world, of course. This one was just, and I kind of hang out at the party until I wake up and I'm back in Texas. But guess what happens, Daniel? I don't have allergies anymore.
I love it.
I have that's giving me goosebumps just even saying it.
Yep.
Now, I wish this part would have gone.
Yep.
Because it didn't. But I could, after that, my allergies just went,
yep.
Fine. I experienced for a time in some unexplained way, this other version of myself in another completely different reality that seemed, every way I knew how to test it seemed physical.
Yeah.
And somehow I was able to bring the version or the component or the detail, I don't know, or maybe just experiencing it back to my life where I didn't have to have that allergy anymore.
Yep.
A story to heal, right? And how did it heal? By reading somebody else's story that prompted me to consider their story that my imagination gave to me in a dream story or an altered experience story, whatever you want to call it. And I woke up with a benefit.
That's amazing. That is such a beautiful story. And there's a few follow-ups I want to say just because I'm connecting other dots. So one of the reasons why I actually took your Beyond Quantum Healing training was because of your interview with Von Galt, who Merkaba Chakras, who talks a lot about parallel realities and things like that. So last week, actually, I had a client who had missing time with interactions with ETs, basically. And he says, can we heal allergies in this? And I'm like, I don't know, because let's see if we can. And so he, 3 days ago, was like, my allergies are significantly less. And I also wanted to talk about, just call out, because you talk about this like a dream experience, but you gave such detailed descriptions of the physicality. It was real to you at a way. So I do want to call out that in my research of dreams, the dreamer themselves are the authority and decision maker about the significance of the dream. So that's very important to know. So we look to your testimony to say, hey, I know the difference between a normal dream and something else. And so you're saying that, I'm like, okay, let's believe it. And then you bring out the proof, or not proof, but like the understanding that shifted your allergies. I'd love to hear your thoughts around, there's one other point I wanted to say is, I think that the quantum healing stuff, the Beyond Quantum Healing and all the stories that emerge up and out of this are immensely powerful and reveal such extraordinary aspects of the world, primarily because of the focus on healing. So the focus on healing and being more present. So I wanted to call that out too. But it reminded me of this story that you shared in the John D. study group about 3 different sort of parallel realities converging in your kitchen. And I was hoping you could share that just briefly to add a different side of it.
Was this with my dad? I'm trying to remember which one it was. I've had a few of these. My kitchen's a sweet place.
Okay. It's like you went to the kitchen and there was like a faucet, and then you were like, did you just go there? And there was like, you heard a faucet go on or something. Yeah. And then you checked in with your husband and your father, and both had different stories as to what just happened. And it was a really mundane experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for telling me. So this, thanks for reminding me. And I have so many strange little things happening all the time. And I actually want to mention that because I think some of this happens to all of us. I think more of it happens to more of us than we realize. And our mind sort of goes, yeah, that couldn't really have happened. So I must have misremembered it. Okay. So I think what it really is like, you're just taking a moment to sort of see what's going on, where a lot of people just gloss over some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, I must not have done that. It is this way. So it couldn't have happened the way I remembered it. It must have happened this other way. So I came in, I think I came into the kitchen, if I'm remembering this right. And I was right by the sink, and I was doing something with the dishes in the sink, and my dad, who lives with us, who's 91, and I typically watch him very carefully because he can toddle and be a little unsteady. And he was, as his habit, he goes to bed early, and he was headed towards the kitchen to have a glass of water. And so as I'm doing my dishes, I take the glass he normally drinks, I filled it with water, and I looked up because he's headed this way. I saw him. I heard his, because believe me, he's got a certain step pattern. Both I saw and heard it, and he's headed this way. I filled the glass of water and I set it down, and he's not there. He's not there. And I look over at my husband, who was at the kitchen table, and I said, I thought Dad was here. And he's like, well, he was here a second ago. And I wondered if he was going to ask me what I was doing, because I think Tom was doing, matter of fact, I think he was putting together notebooks for the BQH class. And there was this big thing going on the kitchen table, and he was waiting for my dad to ask him that. He's like, I wondered, I saw him getting the water, and I wondered why he didn't ask me anything. I said, well, when did that happen? He said, well, just before you walked in to the kitchen. And I'm like, what? Because that didn't make any sense at all. And so that exchange happens really quickly. I set down the glass of water. I go all the way into the bedroom. I guarantee you, my dad moves very, very slowly. He was all the way in bed, all the way underneath all of his stuff, all the way with the light off and everything over there. He hadn't moved in a long time, right? So it was all different, right? It wouldn't have done any good to ask Dad what he remembered, but seeing him come and not having everything, like a weird sort of time convergent, different details happened right there. And there was really no explaining it at all. And I think this kind of stuff happens a lot. And the really wonderful thing about this, Daniel, is this has been helpful in my marriage to my husband, because what we have moved from, we're both kind of alpha firstborn kids, and we can argue about what's what quite a bit. At least that's, our personalities. And now what we're able to do is, I gave you those keys. Well, not in my reality. You did not give me the keys and it diffuses that whole thing, right? Where it's like, well, that's actually plausible, right? Yep. If you have an experience like we did with the glass and the faucet and a bunch of other things like that, you can go, well, yeah, in that reality that happened, and in this reality that happened. So the emotional component of needing to be right kind of vaporizes. And that goes back to some of what you talked about with contradictions. And when you can think about just small things like that, these viewpoints, these experiences of these tiny things of reality contradict each other. But if you can accept that some sort of nexus point or vortex point that provides all of it right there at a place, even my dream where sometimes somehow these realities either converge and then reconfigure, right? Yep. Then reconfigure themselves after sort of intersecting. Then you don't have to be so worried about being right or objective reality. Is there an objective reality? You could keep talking. You could talk about that all day long. I don't know. I'm just one subject looking at the concept of objective reality, and that right there throws a wrench in the works, right?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Yeah, I personally don't believe in an objective reality. I believe in a non-dual sort of, we're participating. When we look to the quantum physics and like the double slit light experiment and observer effects, we go, okay, actually multiple sets of historical facts can coexist in ways that are mind-blowing. But I wanted to turn back to the, like, how you got to be in such a space where you can, perceive multiple different realities and not be freaked out about it. And one of the hypotheses I have is because, I mean, you, in terms of your like participation in the John D study group, you said, oh, Dolores Cannon spirit told me to like look at this thing and go. But even tuning back to your interaction with Dolores Cannon, it happened because you said a prayer and you got instruction and you took that instruction and you had an imagination that seemed ridiculous, but you asked for proof and you established that true trust and rapport with all of this stuff. So I was hoping you could speak about that process of opening up, inviting connection with the imagination or spirits or whatever, and establishing trust in a way that works for you. Because it sounded like you were like, I have this demand, right? Like, or like, I need if she chooses me, then it's real, that sort of thing. So could you speak about that? Yeah.
Wow. I'm suddenly imagining all the neurons firing across my brain when all this was going on, because at the time, even though I dabbled in reading about some of this a little bit, first of all, there wasn't near as much of this available back in 2008, not near as much. There was some, but not very much. And I actually thought some of what I was doing, even though I wasn't raised religiously, I really wasn't, but I actually thought, I wondered if there was some sort of divine aspect that was trying to talk to me. And I wondered if I was arguing with that divine aspect, meaning a divine aspect that wasn't originating from me. And I thought, if that's a divine aspect, or, God or a messenger from God himself giving me a message, what did that mean for my eternal soul that I was arguing with it? I mean, that might sound, it almost sounds a little like I'm giggling about it right now, but it was a scary thing for me. Everything was scary for me at the time in 2008, because these huge things were happening. The day I had after meeting those light beings and they gave me the list of things to do, to this day, I've never had a day like that where everything that happened to me, I felt like I was in a movie and it couldn't even be real. It couldn't even be real. And what I kind of learned from that, it was, okay, I'll believe that. Okay, I'll accept that. Okay, I'll the next one and the next one and the next one. It was sort of like, I once heard, and I think it was Teal Swan. I don't know if you know Teal Swan. I know a little bit about her. I don't really follow her very much, but I happened to hear a question and answer, and it stuck in my head. And when things stick in your head, that's something else too. Why is this sticking in my head? Don't dismiss it. It's sticking in your head for a reason. It's sort of like, hey, pay attention to this, right? And the thing that she said in just this interview, I might have been waiting for another YouTube. It might have been a clip of her stuff while I'm waiting for something else. Somebody asked her a question. And the question may have been something like, how do we on a day-to-day basis really change our lives, expand our consciousness, and shift away from sometimes these narrowly focused humans that we are, who get into these patterns and ruts and stuff. And Teal, this is my memory of it anyway, she stopped for a moment. She said, let me say this. You should anyone who's listening to this should take a day. And this really stuck with me. You should take a day where the entire day, from the moment you get up in the morning, the entire day, when a thought or an impulse occurs to you, follow it without evaluating it or questioning it. I mean, with some, of course, exceptions,
Yeah.
don't jump out a window or whatever. But, she talked about, like, she's just don't allow that part of your brain tell you that it's not right, or that it's silly, or that it's whatever. And if it seems extreme or complex, or it doesn't make any sense, do it anyway.
Yeah.
And see what happens. And that's kind of extraordinary. And while I can't say that I even have the luxury of I have too many responsibilities to have even large portions of days like that. What I have found is, in some of the stories that come back to me from clients, other practitioners, just other people who have interesting experiences, is when they feel something happen and it doesn't quite make any sense, and it's not in the plans or whatever, and they do it anyway. Yeah. I know this road is 3 times as long to get to the place where we're going, and it doesn't make any logical sense for me to take that route, but I have this impulse to go that way. Man, go that way. You might avoid an accident. You might run into something that you need to see, or will expand your life over there. These little impulses, they're part of, I think, the same part of our culture that demonizes the imagination, doesn't want us to follow that sort of spontaneous, intuitive voice that we all have, but we have silenced it. And we have diminished it, dimmed it, and made fun of it, and have done all of that for so long. It's a very small, tiny thing within many of us, and it needs to be encouraged to come out. But I'm actually working on a new offering, a new way of approaching connecting to your higher consciousness that I'm calling Quantum Connect. And you, Daniel, you might be very aware of one of the things that we as quantum healers do, and I'm talking about the whole lineage of quantum healers, is we tend to talk to our clients before having a hypnosis or trance session by talking to them about what, a trance might feel like, and also this idea of allowing ourselves to visualize or imagine. And visualize is a problematic word because, like I say over and over again, people who've been blind from birth can do this. So do they visualize? Nah, I don't think so. I think what they're doing is using their imagination to create a story in their mind. You can use the term visualization, and some of these can be very visual. But with Quantum Connect, what I've done is I've taken some of what we've done as these little practice sessions, right? These little, I'll show you how it works, moments before clients actually lay down and have these long trance sessions. And what I found, of course, over the years, over all of these years, is some of the most extraordinary connections, informations, understandings, and discoveries have come from, I'm just sitting here and I'm going to pretend something for a couple minutes.
Yeah. All right, so it is about time to go into the breakout rooms. Again, this interview is recorded, and the whole thing is being recorded, so you can get to the second half of this if you want to go into a breakout room by going to our members archive page on exometaverse.org afterwards. So you can feel really free to join the breakout room. We'll continue playing the interview after we set up the breakout room. So if you want to, you can continue being here and exploring with us. The prompt for the breakout room, so how this will work is Zinka will distribute you into the breakout rooms. There'll be a little bit of jostling around because some of you will stay, some of you will go. And you can assign a timekeeper to the breakout room, so everyone can have about 5 minutes to have a communication. And that can be about stories that heal, any of the extraordinary stories, anything you want to share about parallel reality shifting or healing through stories, or also you can ask for just support or how you might connect with people. So with that, Zinka, would you distribute people, please?
I got it. Yep.
Thank you.
Perfect.
All right. I am going to start the video again.
And because of that, I thought, I'm going to lift that up out and sort of let's just talk about just this thing we do here, because then it removes the entire thing of we're going to take most of the afternoon to do this thing over here, where you have to do this thing that we call going into the trance, which we have to do this thing, which is to not pay attention to your conscious mind or whatever, when maybe one of the ways, at least we can try to access that higher portion of ourselves or other realms of our consciousness that we've walled off, is by doing this thing over here.
Yeah.
And I'm working really hard on doing that right now. And once again, it's the same kind of thing, because the goal there is to also bypass the analyzing conscious portion of us that just denies and throws up roadblocks all the time and comes back to programming and denying all of that imaginative information and power that we have. But by doing it kind of bypassing it with speed, which is really, really interesting. But it's really interesting for the people who don't have the time or inclination or even interest in having a thing like a hypnosis session. And it's been extraordinary, but it's also very much playing up and showcasing that even there, the thing that people have to overcome is our cultural programming and automatic stepping into, I'm going to go up to the Rolodex in my brain and provide you with the correct answer for the question that you're asking me, when I'm simply saying, follow your impulse and give me the very first little tiny thing that shows up. And it doesn't have to make any sense. And as a matter of fact, it not making sense is probably the more helpful and interesting answer than the one that's supposed to be logical and make sense.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I have that experience with working with clients too, where they want to judge it and make sure it makes sense. I heard that in terms of this voyage that you went on, in terms of relating to imagination, that you started in this place of conditioning or cultural programming, and that your interactions were like really intense to almost paranormal. And you slowly went through this process, and now you feel very comfortable at it. So I just wanted to call that out. That's also consistent with the findings from Ray Hernandez in his survey, is after, if you have multiple contact events, it starts to make more sense. You start to feel more positive about it, but you start in really challenging spaces. So I was hoping you could speak about perhaps even this greater cultural narrative, like why do they keep us in boxes? Where are we at now? And where are we going in the world? Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah. A little bit back to the objective reality being considered by the subjective experience, but I will give it a try. So first of all, it really boils down to the fact, humans, the human baby, and I know that you're bringing up a new one yourself. They're so dependent, right? If you look out into the natural world, baby horses, all kinds of other babies, they get up and they can at least start, walking pretty quickly. And the length of time that a human is dependent upon a parent is extraordinarily long compared to other mammals of our planet. So to survive, we as humans have learned that we have to let those who are doing things like keeping us safe and bringing us food, we have to kind of do what they say, right? And what they say is often a repetition of what they were told and what they were told and what they were told back throughout all of history, right? And so it's a repeated ancestral, dare I even say, DNA, kind of an epigenetic thing that's like built into us, which is interesting. I'm going to quickly mention that, I was with my session with Dolores, I was a caveman that broke a bunch of caveman societal rules and was cast out. And that was a dangerous place for me. So, I've got this theme going on, even back into whatever kind of version of human I was back, my hairy self back then, where I bucked the system and asked questions. Why can't we do it this way? And, the whole powers that be at that time were like, you can't because we say so.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's repetition, a lot of it's just, conditioning, but a lot of it has to do with safety. And that is hardwired in to us as little kids. And so even the people who love us, our teachers, our clergy, our parents, they want us to continue, many, in the way that they see to keep us all safe. So they don't see a lot of the detriment in it. It goes back to these, knee-jerk things, but knee-jerk maybe is the wrong term. Again, this is so hardwired into what we've had to do for millennia to survive. So some of that is holding back expansion, I believe. Here's another thing that I think holds back expansion: mental illness. I think a lot of people who are locked up. I mean, let's go back even to, me in the round bed with no glasses and no water pouring from my face. I was already imagining trying to explain what I was going through to somebody who wasn't going through what I was going through and what they might do to me if I shared that. And so we're sort of paralyzed, even those of us who have these paranormal experiences. My father-in-law and his parents stopped on the side of the road in Southern Illinois in the 1940s and saw a spaceship in the field. My father-in-law ended up going into the Air Force and then into, the industrial military complex that supports those who leave that area by building aircraft and everything. And my husband and some other families brought that up more than once. And he's just, he won't say that didn't happen, but he will acknowledge that something strange happened, that he can't explain whatever that was. And now we're going to stop talking about it. Please keep whatever that was in a box over there. I'm not going to think about it. We're not going to talk about it. And in this version of him that we know in this life, never, as far as I know, contemplated, expanded, allowed that experience, and neither did his parents, by the way, to be anything more than, what was that? What's for dinner? I mean, they wouldn't even allow their imagination to consider any of it with conversation. It was all about hurry up and shut it down and let's get back to what's really important, the chicken dinner that's on the table or whatever. And so there's that, and I'm losing track. Did I follow the answer? Okay.
Well, it's actually funny you brought this up because my aunt saw a flying saucer in a field in like Indiana or Illinois, right? And saw beings and has I ask her about it sometimes. She's like, oh, these are the memories that I have. It's so distant. Who knows what happened, sort of thing. Her brother, actually, twin brother, was committed for a while talking about aliens. So it's very, very relevant, actually, that you're bringing it up to my own personal history as to why I'm doing this work. So I sort of lost track with seeing that connection too. I was like, whoa, that's there. In terms of like the like next steps with our society, right? Like where do you see us going?
There you are. Well, it has to do with communication. In my sense. And this isn't anything new for me, meaning I remember even as a kid trying to tell my mother some things that I saw or experienced, and she would tell me that I didn't. So even, and that's nothing new. Many of us were grown up that way, but this is carried on. And here's a famous thing that I bring up a lot because it's just actually a couple different things that point this out. I've had clients that have come to me, again, the young children thing. I had a man come to see me from Kansas City, had 2 kids, both of them carried past life memories forward into their very young age. First, he had one, the first child thought it was a one-off. Then the second child came along and started up again with a different memory. One had a memory of being living on another planet. And the second one had, I believe it was this order, memories of coming from the inner earth.
Yeah.
Right. So some of these new children who are remembering these things, we've boxed it off, right? And this expansion of consciousness, it's expanding through the family line. And his entire session, Daniel, was really not so much. He did have a curiosity about his children and the fact that he was the father of these kids who were bringing this up. His biggest problem was the disconnect he was having with his wife. Because his wife was so traditional, so conventional. Her entire focus about this crazy stuff that was coming out of their kid's mouth was, how do we make it stop?
Wow. Okay.
How do we get them to shut up? How that's going to keep them from getting in this school and having this thing, and those people over there will think we're whatever. And his biggest reason for having the session was his relationship with his wife, because he at least was curious about it and wanted to talk about it. And her whole thing is, oh my God, no. The first one is finally settling down, talking about it. And the second one is now talking about something similar. What are we going to do to make them stop? And his biggest problem was the relationship with the wife. And it's extraordinary to have someone like that as a client, and he keeps bringing up that that the wife, has this idea of being shunned from the parts of society that are important for her to participate in. And what I was able to, and I think in his session and some of that, he might very well have a neighbor whose child is doing the exact same thing.
Yep.
And it's because we're all not talking about it, and we all are following some sort of prescribed rules. Here's another one. Man comes from I think it was a tax or an accounting office or something like that. He comes to have a session with me, and he's so grateful, just even for the time that we talk about stuff that you and I are talking about, like for the past hour or so, right? He's so grateful about it. He's like, I don't have anyone in my life I can talk to about this. And do you know what was fascinating about it was like, no one you work with, no one in your family, no, none of them. Somebody from his office comes to me a few months later.
Oh, interesting.
Right? Now, because of confidentiality, I can't tell the second guy, hey, there's someone in your office who came to see me, had this kind of session. But I can and did say, you'd be surprised who might be sitting right next to you, who's having some of these similar things. And then that is the shared thing again, right? If you share the stories, something about sharing the stories allows our beingness to accept, and then maybe even benefit from some of this. I've got a quick allergy update. Actually, I was telling somebody about, actually was a caregiver of my dad's, a young woman, a beautiful, her name was Liv, just loved her so much. She's a new mom of her own right now. This has been years past, but Liv was here with my dad before Dad moved in. And she was asking me how things were going. I said, I had a great session today. And it was all about this woman, again, about allergies. And I was talking to her about this idea. And a lot of allergies have to do with fear. There's a root cause of fear, sometimes not kind of fear that you'd think about. And I said, and it just resolved so completely. It was actually one of those, where it resolved before the session even started. The whole answer came up before it ever started and solved the allergy. The session was just a bonus. The session was a bonus experience. And I was really excited about this. I was telling Liv about it. And she says, I have this really awful cat allergies, and I've got several cats here. She says, it's not bad in your house. I don't have carpets. That's probably part of it. But she also didn't touch the cats. And I told Liv, I said, well, a lot of it has to do with fear. And so she was interested in some of these stories. Again, how do stories heal? So I said, well, one of the things that you could possibly do, and I mean, I'm saying this as casually as anything. I'm cooking dinner as I'm doing this. I remember I'm like getting plates out and I'm just chatting with her about this. I said, you might think about when your allergies started and some sort of fear. And then, you know what I actually said? I actually said, like, somebody could have really scared you. It might've been like, at Halloween time or something, and her face, and see, I'm following a thing that just kind of lands in my head, and her face goes like this.
Yep.
And suddenly she remembers it actually happened to be Halloween. She was a young child who went, how some neighbors, they'll make like a haunted house in their garage.
Yep.
And they can get very creative. And they can get kind of scary, especially for a little kid.
Yep.
And she had a cousin who took her little kid. She's like 5. She is not ready for what she's going to see in this garage at all. And she, something pops up out of a coffin or something really, really horrifying to the poor 5-year-old, runs out of the garage, but there's a cat right there, like trips over the cat. There's a big thing with a cat right there. Boom.
Yep.
So what actually is going on there? Again, the body has a lot to do with it. So you know what the body did then? The body, not the mind, but the body took that horrible fright, the sensation of cat dander, and combined them, produced the allergy that the immune system now overreacts against.
Yep.
So guess what? She loses her cat allergy.
Wonderful.
Just by having this
Wow.
conversation
Yep.
about a session I had. That wasn't even the conversation I had with that client before she ever even had her session. And again, the shared stories. So it's all about communication. Okay, back to what is happening in society. Censorship.
Yep.
All kinds of, you can't say that. You're not supposed to say that. Oh, you said that. We're going to erase you or delete you or cancel you or all of that. So people are seeing things paranormal or more mundane, and they're being told they can't talk about it. Yep. We're being told to muzzle ourselves in so many different ways, figuratively and literally. And more and more and more people are waking up to this, some slowly, some very, very quickly. I'm actually thrilled about where we're headed. I'm absolutely thrilled about where we're headed. We are in what I believe is one of these nexus points. I think these crazy things are going on. We're in this. I did an interview with somebody. We called it the roundabouts of time. I think we're in a roundabout. We're in a traffic circle right now. We're doing this right now, and more people are coming in here, and there's all these spokes of these wheels, And if you listen to people, it seems like we already see the exit on the golden road. We already see that, but we're still in this thing, and a lot of people want to bring more people in, and other people are leaving the planet, and some people are checking out. Here's what I don't know. I don't have really any sense of the time frame.
Yep.
A lot of people are talking about 2022 being pivotal. I don't know. A lot of people are talking about 2020.
Yep.
And I'm not saying 2020 wasn't important, but some of the senses that we either get, we get these overwhelming, well, here's another one. People are having lots of dreams about floods and tsunamis and stuff, either they're remembering dreams they've had in the past, or they're having them lately, or they're, these big. Well, are those figurative or literal? I also say, water's liquid consciousness. So for me, in my dreams, I've really come to realize oceans and waves and things like that. The water element can be considered not literal, but sometimes figural. But again, hydration and having good water flow in your body does have. So I think it's both, right? But again, our dreams, I don't know. Overall, I'm extremely, extremely positive. I will say this. I answered an email yesterday. I'm going to try not to cry. Just thinking about it makes me want to cry. And she said, she wrote me this long email. She said, I don't even know why I'm writing to you. She says, I just don't understand why I'm suddenly crying for no reason. And I answered her points and questions, but I answered that one in particular by saying, would it help you to know that I find myself crying for no reason? No discernible reason, really, or the smallest thing setting me off, and suddenly I'm crying. And that's not, I'm 60. I've always been glass half full kind of gal. I've always been extremely optimistic, even through stuff. But I think we as humans, we're like a flock of birds in a way. We're being affected as a species. And I think some of that is bubbling up through even the most optimistic of us in society. I think there's a fatigue and a sadness about some of what we've been through, some of our innocence that we've lost, some of what we've seen, the atrocities that we've seen and continue to see. That is hard to take because we have tender hearts. And those who seem to be pulling the strings, either their hearts are constructed differently than ours, or they may not have hearts at all. They may be, the origin may be completely different. And I bet Vaughn would have something to say about that. Our friend Vaughn Galt. So there's a lot to consider. I don't think it behooves us to get too desperate or feel too hopeless, because I don't see how that helps us at all. But I think it's okay to be nice to yourself if you're tired. If you're tired, unexplained tired after the last 2 years, my response to you is, who's not tired? At least some part of you. What if somebody is as happy-go-lucky and not reacting in a grieving sort of way or in a fatigue-ridden sort of way over the last 2 years, and I'm talking about reasonable functioning adults, I'm a little worried about what you're experiencing in society. Worried may not be the wrong, may be the wrong term. You must be experiencing something completely different than me. The real fluffy, oh, we just have to focus on only positive, and if we I don't know. That's not me either. I'm a pragmatist. I'm here to help people solve problems, big and small. So I think we have to realistically see what's in front of us again. And that all the way comes back to communication. And so I'm watching like everyone else is watching. I haven't, in a place like a grocery store or a doctor's office and those kinds, I've yet to do this thing. And I've just stood my ground, even back when it almost, I was very rare. But, I also live in rural Kansas, and I got away with it here. But again, thank you, intuition, God, angels, light beings who put me right here, because I've been all over North America. I could have been somewhere else, but I was right here. More of us just kind of have to wake up to some of that. And think about these big things, like, just because I'm told something's true, is it true? We've been conditioned, again, go back to the way you've been told, the way you've been, but that's always been true. But, critical thinking has been removed from our society in incremental ways for a very long time. And bringing that back is important. And if we just could keep talking to each other, and sometimes that talking has to be underground, backdoor, small group, kind of thing. You know what Dolores said to me in one of my last communications with her, when they tend to be early morning. I wake up and ask some things, and some people were, I think I was getting ready to have another interview about exactly this, kind of the world today, the community, the situation we find ourselves in. And that person, this other particular interview, was very focused on this part of it, and that's concern. But while I was thinking about it and waking up and feeling Dolores's presence, here's what she told me. And when you say she, does she say it exactly? Well, it's this huge impression that it just kind of goes, woof. This is what a lot of people call downloads, right? And it's just this huge impression that lands on me like in a box almost. And I can either ignore that box, or I can sit with it and kind of open it up and see, well, what is it that feels like she's saying? Because it has a shape, it has a texture, it has a sense. I don't really hear the exact voice, right? I mean, that's typically rare. Sometimes it's a word or two though. But I don't hear voices. It's these big impressions, right? And the impression that came to me and that I then decoded after that was, she said, a lot of people are focused on this, and it's certainly a concern. There's other things that are concerned. She says, you know what, the number one most detrimental thing we've been through in the last 2 years was the social distancing. Number one. You're not hugging, you're not putting your heart field next to another one in the physicality. You're not talking to your neighbor about this, that, or the other. And you're putting blocks between you.
I'm just tracking all the conversation because we're getting close to the end here, but I wanted to just call out, we've been talking a lot about allergies, which is the body's responses, almost like censorship, right? Almost like censorship in the body is an aggressive response within the body. And if we can see our society as a single body, something like an allergy is happening, especially in our relationship with dreams, imagination, quantum healing, and things like that. And it turns out we've already talked about the antidote here, which is sharing our stories. And it can actually miraculously cure the allergy in ways that are step outside of time, like your story. The allergy was cured before the session. So that's really important to call out, and that's a really great reason for hope. So thank you for sharing your wisdom. I'd love to invite you to share any final wisdom, and also to talk about the work you're doing and how people can connect with you, especially perhaps through the Quantum Forum or the BQH sessions.
I wrote down this word kiss. It's another quick story. I hope I'm not taking, I love
Go for it. Yeah, absolutely.
So this relates in, it just fills in more of the other story. So this was the story of I'm just talking to the client before even having the session. That's already it. We've already discovered it. The session was a bonus that I came home and told my friend Liv, and then she cured her allergy right then and there. Here was the story. And how wonderful that we do this quantum healing stuff, because people like this client can come to somebody like me and tell me this absolutely crazy story. Listen to what this story was. She comes to me, my biggest story is I can't kiss my fiance. When I kiss my fiance, I break out into hives, all of this stuff. She goes, now here's the thing. We live together. We are intimate. We have sexual relations. She's very clear. I just can't kiss him. We can do all the thing. I can't kiss him. And, and I've been to all these allergists and I've dermatologists, and none of it makes any sense. So once again, after doing this work for all these years, really understanding about allergy, root cause is fear from something, and it could be a past life fear. Okay. So it's not like you can always puzzle it out. Right. But you can start there. And I was talking to her about, well, have you ever been assaulted by another man or anything like that? And she was like, no, no, no. And then we were trying to do a bunch of other talk about stuff. And then all of a sudden she stopped. She goes, wait a second. You asked me if I was assaulted ever by another man. And I took that question as, was I ever raped by another man? And the answer to being raped is I never was violated in that way. She said, but when, as we were talking, I'm remembering something that happened to me once when I was a young teen, where this man took her, I think it was under a stairwell or something, and took her and shoved her up against the wall and then violently kissed her. And then some people came through and the whole thing was over, and she dismissed it. She said, but nothing happened to me. I said, what do you mean nothing happened to you?
Yeah.
She goes, well, he didn't rape me. I'm like, but he violated you in this way. And she said, oh my God, you're right. And that was the cure of her allergies, is just knowing, and then her body being able to release that fear. So, and she could do little peck kisses all the time, but when kissing got intense, her body provided the allergenic response that was the fear response that was recorded within her body tissue, right? So she felt so ashamed of herself that kissing and lovemaking, her body, had this thing. And so we as quantum healers, sometimes in the most extraordinary ways, are able to assist clients in ways that, a traditional view of looking at things just can't, whether it be I saw ETs or angels or had this other thing happen, or simply kissing my boyfriend gives me hives. I mean, 17 dermatologists can dismiss you for that one, right? Our work is more needed than ever. Why? Because of what we've already talked about these last 2 years. These last 2 years, I'm telling you, people are more and more questioning. I wonder why they're more and more questioning the conventional approach to issues, whether they be physical or otherwise. And our work of consciousness, heart-based, is really, really growing and gaining a new audience, and people are looking at what we do in a different way than before the last 2 years. So if you are a quantum healer of any kind, and I'm talking EFT, maybe you're a cranial sacral therapist, I'm learning Qigong, some energy work, if you do Reiki, any of that kind of alternative healing, you're welcome to join us at our big community called quantumhealers.com, where we get together and we do something that I don't think happens anywhere else on the internet, at least not anywhere else that I know of, which is we share perspective and advice across modalities. So we don't just have, even though, yes, I have BQH and Beyond Quantum Healing, I'm teaching that as a modality. It's not a top-down conversation. We come at it discussing things horizontally, and people learn across the spectrum, right? Without anybody, again, the different perspectives, no objective, you have to do things this way in our group. And we have a worldwide directory. And as far as BQH, we are translating it into multiple languages. German and Spanish are launched right now. You can take the BQH and French, of course. French, German, and Spanish are all available. Of course, English available online. The Beyond Quantum Healing modality is taught online, but I also have intensive practice sessions here in Kansas 2 or 3 times a year. The next one's coming up in June. There's still a couple classes, a couple seats left for that. That's for somebody who's already been through the online class, but wants to get together with other people and have these kinds of experiences. And I'm telling you, these kinds of things are things that open you up. When you sit and watch, or even just observe, let alone participate in some of these expanded consciousness expansion sessions, things happen in your own life that open up. It's just another way of accepting those stories, and then the possibilities grow within your own world. So come find us at quantumhealers.com for all of that. And and find your own quantum healer, either online or in person. The directory is very easy to use. Daniel, this has been so much fun. I really, really enjoy your energy. I loved your questions. And thanks for putting up with me, because I know I did most of the talking.
Oh, it's perfect. I'm so grateful for our conversation. It's been a blast. And thank you so much for all the work that you do. It's super important. I would encourage anyone to check out. I've done the training. It's wonderful. I'm a member of the forum. It's wonderful. So I give my wholehearted recommendation and endorsement for that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And with that, I'll turn off the recording. Thank you. Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone, for being here and listening to that story. We have a few minutes left, about 5 minutes, to address any questions, or if you've had a story that come up that you would like to share, now would be a great time. So if you have any questions, you can raise your hand, put it in the chat. If you have something you'd like to share, you're invited to do so. And so we've got Carol. Would you unmute and share your question or thought?
I had a question on, because I have done some hypnosis on myself. I mean, I've had people do hypnosis on me. I think I've done the Dolores Cannon version. I'm not 100% sure, but I haven't done this type. But I had a question about having some kind of weird pattern that keeps showing up, kind of like she was mentioning something that, well, having something that's a repetitive thing happen that, you know, it's because of something like she was mentioning with the kiss. But this has to do with financial abuse. And I've had and also not being heard. It's these two things that go kind of hand in hand. And I'm having this block around it right now where somebody owes me really a lot of money and they're not dealing with it. And I've tried to take it in a nice way. And now it looks like I'm going to have to go through the legal channels in the terms of I'm on a semi-legal, but I mean, I might have to go to the next level or whatever, which is totally not what I want to do. But can that be something past life that's triggering all of that? Because I'm in my own life, current life, I'm just not seeing where it's coming from. And I've done some hypnosis, but it hasn't, the root of this is not coming through, you know?
Yeah. So with like past life regressions, yeah, we usually do turn to them when this life experiences don't make sense. Like it's not adding up. You're like, oh, there's something added to the equation. Generally how we might approach that in the BQH methodology is to establish an intention. And that intention would be to experience financial healing or experience the understanding around that issue. And then it goes through a rather lengthy hypnotic induction that you might be familiar with Dolores Cannon's work. But then you find yourself in a place that may or may not be a past life regression. It's the most relevant time and place for the accomplishment of that intention. To me, it sounds like past life stuff or something where you could perhaps, yeah. So I won't say any more beyond that, but that's how technically you can might address it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Daniel, do you want to talk a little bit about how different the hypnosis is to regular hypnosis? Because did Dolores Cannon discover all this crazy stuff?
It's pretty wild. Yeah. That's so I was trained in regular hypnosis, and then I said, that's probably good enough to do ET hypnotism. And then I spent about a month doing hypnosis with ET experiencers. So, all right, let's get some more experience, and I turned to the quantum stuff. It really is. It goes because of the quality of the trance and the container of the quantum healing. And if you have questions around what that means, I would invite you to investigate like how quantum applies. But it is pretty wild. Like you talk to. I mean, it's a unique session every time. you don't really have expectations except for the fact that your intention will be accomplished, because that you are a sovereign being that can accomplish things by your will. And so you can end up going to past life experiences, starseed experiences, between life. There's just a whole list in Candace's training around what you might end up dealing with and how you might end up dealing with it. And so that's like lifetimes as a rock or whatever, so it's rather, it works with anything that comes up. The quality of the trance is also very important. The connection with sources of wisdom, which ultimately are your higher self. That is actually one of the more potent aspects of this work, is being able to channel that through your own body and into a wisdom that you can come back to through like watching the recordings. Yeah.
I know we're like almost done. I don't see anybody else's hand up, but how would you describe parallel realities? Like, how would you put that in? How would you describe, how would you define that?
Such a big question. People do, like in the context of hypnosis, it's like parallel realities might be a different version of yourself. Actually, God, what happened? Like within the last 2 days, there was a session of mine that there was like, it felt like someone channeled a parallel reality of them. They were a walk-in of themselves from a parallel reality or something like that. It was very fascinating, but it's basically, we live in a multiverse. There is, we can think about this in terms of the double slit light experiment, the quantum physics actually. So if you don't look at something, it becomes like the light is a waveform, and then it has a possibility of being both here and there. But when you examine it, it collapses its wave down into a particle and goes into a particular place, as opposed to being a distributed probability. So that's something like parallel realities that we work with in the quantum healing state, is we are seeing that you are you're like actually a wave form, like your energy, but in the conscious mind experience, you're this physical body that's walking around in this meat suit type experience. And so we ask that waveform, that energy pattern, to express itself in a different type of situation. And somehow through the magic of consciousness, it really can become particularized through like this slit as opposed to that slit, based on the actual conscious, basically it's the observer principle. Yeah.
Cool.
Right. Yeah, so it seems like we're at time. So thank you all for being here. Yeah, and may you all sleep well and dream well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Take care.
Awesome. You guys have a great night.
Bye.
Good job, Daniel. Yeah.